Hi, and welcome to the Team Deacons podcast. This podcast is a dialogue between Roger and James Deacons, often joined in the conversation by a guest. It's very informal, and we never know where it will go. We're connecting through Zoom, so bear that in mind when you hear the audio. If you'd like to submit a question or topic, please do so by emailing pod, P-O-D, at rogerdeacons.com. For over 100 years, Zeiss has served the artistic pursuit of visual storytellers from around the globe. Built for cinematographers, the Zeiss Supreme Prime and Supreme Prime Radiance lenses provide unparalleled creativity and a unique cinematic look for your next project. Zeiss Cinema lenses, made for cinematography. Please note that this recording with Cillian was done before the death of his dear friend and fellow castmate in Peaky Blinders, Helen McQuarrie. This episode is dedicated to her and her wonderful work. Today we're speaking with an actor. His credits are many and include 28 Days Later, Inception, Dunkirk, and Peaky Blinders. We're pleased to welcome Cillian Murphy with us today. Thank you, Cillian, for doing this.
Yeah, hi, Cillian.
And it's great to see you again.
Hi, guys. Yeah, so lovely to see you both.
We'd like to start with your telling us what your path was to where you are today. Was this something you always knew you wanted to do? Did you go down another path? Let us know.
Well, I really wanted to be a musician, which I feel is quite a common story with actors. I've met plenty of actors who are failed or frustrated musicians like myself. So I wanted to do that for years and years, playing in bands. And we took it quite seriously. And we were about 19 or 20. We got offered a record deal, and then we ended up not taking the record deal, falling apart. And then I simultaneously discovered theatre at the same time. I'd never really been to the theatre or taken any real interest, but I went to see a play in Cork which blew my mind, and just out of curiosity asked could I audition for a part in that theatre company's next production, and they said yes. So I auditioned and got the part. It all happened in the month of August 1996. I know this because I was also studying law in the university, and I failed my law degree. We got offered a record deal, and then I got a part in the play in the same month.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was just a real sort of collision of events in my life, really.
But did you go to an audition with any experience of acting? With the way you tell it, it sounds like you just said, "Can I audition?" and without any knowledge of acting or experience of acting.
Yeah, pretty much. I'd done a little bit in college, a tiny bit of drama society stuff. But I'd always been interested in films. Like I was always watching films as a kid with my brother, and watching the films that everybody watches, those formative kind of Scorsese, Tarantino kind of stuff. I was watching those movies, and I was just really curious. I was into performing, and because the music was going down the toilet pretty quickly, I felt like this could be a substitute way of doing live performance, because you still had a audience element, and you were still up on a stage. So it's sort of just, it all kind of by accident came into place.
It's interesting that if you were a rock singer, you would always, or generally always have a live audience, but which you would have obviously at theatre, but most of your work is in film. Do you miss having a live audience?
Well, I've continued to work in theatre throughout my career. I did a show about 2 years ago, was the last time we did a show, and I've always loved it. This sort of sheer fragility of it and absurdity of theatre, and how at any point it could just collapse and break. Right. And I love the beautiful kind of unwritten contract that the audience and the performer has in theatre. So I keep doing it. and I also feel like it's because I didn't train as an actor. So when you go and do a play for a prolonged period, for a long run, and you're doing 8 shows a week, it's the only time as an actor where you can really, we don't have time. As an actor, when you're walking around your apartment or you're at home with your family, you can't practice, so you get out of shape, and so, but when you do theater, I find when you come off of a theater run, you're always a better actor, I think, anyway. Certainly,
yeah, you've used all those muscles.
Yeah, continuously, day in, day out. And it really focuses you, and you're just up there and you've got to take responsibility. And I like that.
What was it like, your first movie that you did, since it's so different than theater, isn't it, for an actor, because you have to do a piece of it and then you have to go back and do that piece again, as opposed to running it straight through?
Yeah, it was very strange. I had no idea about, the things would be shot out of sequence, so that you would have to do stuff from different angles or different perspectives. That was a whole learning process, which I loved. I was fascinated by the process of it. And it did, I think I don't look back at old work, but I'm sure I was brutal in all of those early films because I was trying to figure it out, and figure out. I think what I've realized over the years is, like, acting on screen, a lot of it is not about showing, it's about sort of thinking. And some of the greatest work I've ever seen on screen is just stillness and people not saying anything, but just transferring information or emotions just through looks and all of that. So that was just watching other actors as well, watching other actors and watching directors and just feeling my way through it and making mistakes, I suppose. And
yeah, I would also think that because you're going out of order and skipping around a lot in the story, maintaining the rhythm of whatever that character is, because if you're shooting something completely out of order, you could maybe bring a different characteristic in that actually wasn't part of the character in the scene that you shot, that's going to butt right to it.
Yeah.
So it must be difficult to keep that in your mind, what your rhythm is.
Yeah, initially it was, but I think all actors who work in film and television have to learn that discipline. You have to know that the script is your primary resource. You have to know it so well. It's your duty to kind of know it because of the nature of the shooting. As you guys know, you're out of sequence all the time, and you could be doing the end of the movie at the beginning and so on. And so you really, really, really have to do all your homework and arrive on set completely prepared, and then also trust your director, really.
Yeah. And what does that entail, getting to know a character? How do you do that?
Well, it seems to be different for every job and for every character, for me anyway. Some of the characters I've played have been so far removed from me as a person and a personality that it requires an awful lot of time. And I was initially, I think, very attracted to that sort of transformative acting, that who is that guy? Is that the same guy? And I've really always admired actors that did that. And then other times you realize that, no, this is just somebody who's very, very like you in a different situation. And you have to kind of put a bit more of yourself in the blender, if you like, than you would normally. So it's a different approach for every single job.
How did the first film I've seen of yours is Sunburn. How did that come about?
Oh my God! Did you see that?
Yeah.
Wow,
we loved it.
That's a big film in my life. I just did an audition for this movie. It was the first feature film I did, and there was this thing in Ireland where Irish people would go and work in America. You would get a visa and you would go and work in America and work in bars and just make loads of money over the summer and then come home. Because at the time, the exchange rate was such that the dollar was really strong. So there was this just culture of, during the summer, thousands of Irish kids would go over to America and work in bars. So this director in America decided that he wanted to make a film about that. And he came to Ireland to cast it. And it was my first time in America. I never...
I wondered
across the Atlantic. So, yeah. So and the people that I met on that film, the director and the DP and the actors that were in the film remain some of my oldest best friends. But then the film never got a release. It's one of those things.
Did it not?
Oh, really?
No, it played at a few
Really?
film festivals, but it never got picked up. But it's a sweet little film, and
It is.
I have a great affection for it because I think mostly of the friendships that I formed making it.
And how about the character? How far removed from you is that character?
He's a bit of a rogue, from what I remember. A bit of a rogue. I was never that roguish, but what was lovely for us going over there, for the actors who were in it who had not been to America before, was sort of embracing all of that kind of American culture. The being in New York City for the first time and just seeing the cars and seeing the buildings, and I think some of that got I can't really remember now. It's so long. It was 20 years ago, but I think some of that was absorbed into the character. Gauche young Irish kid goes to America.
Yeah. It seems some of your early films are really quite edgy, like that, and then Disco Pigs.
Oh, that was
28
great.
Days Later, obviously, but also Intermission you did with John Crowley.
Yeah.
I mean, they're kind of sort of independent films, but they're very edgy, and the characters are kind of really kind of out there. Is that just chance? Were you just lucky to get offered those kind of roles and expand your kind of ability to find characters through that?
Or were you looking for something
were you
like
looking
that?
for them? Yeah.
Well, Disco Pigs, that was the play that I auditioned for. That was the play that got made into a movie. So,
oh, wow.
So that was the first ever professional part I had, and then it got eventually made into a film. So that was how that film came about. And Intermission, which John directed, that was also written by an Irish playwright called Marco Rowe. And I don't know, there were brilliant parts for a young actor, really brilliantly written parts.
Yeah.
And I suppose when I did that play, Disco Pigs, written by a writer called Enda Walsh, who's also become a really close friend of mine, I began to realize or understand what good writing was, I think. And the bar had been set quite high for me with that play. And so then I began to kind of, in the later work, or the work that happened after that, was to look for writing that I found as satisfying as that. And luckily, Ireland has a great tradition of brilliant writers. So there was a few that I managed to hook up with.
How much of the character, like in Disco Pigs then, was in the script, and how much did you bring to it?
That was all written, all of that.
Really?
He wrote that in a kind of a sort of like a sort of a Cork, sort of like patois, like a Cork slang, invented language, sort of almost like Clockwork Orange or something like that. And so that was all there. I just had to really just try to bring that character to life. I mean, he was 17.
Was Clockwork Orange an influence?
Well, I saw a production of that play in Cork City. That was the one that blew my mind.
Oh, really? Yeah, I can imagine.
And I remember, actually, you guys remember this. Remember when Clockwork Orange, the movie, was like banned and you couldn't get your hands on it.
Yeah.
It certainly was in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I remember then we took Disco Pigs, the play, to Canada, and I managed to get my hands on a VHS of Clockwork Orange in Canada, and I was so proud of that VHS copy, and then watched it over and over again, the movie, wore it out. So I don't know, but at that time you're exploring, and those very provocative, kind of dangerous films are very attractive to a young male actor.
Okay, this is maybe a hard question, but back then those independent movies seemed to have so much more life than a lot of film production, certainly being made in Hollywood, and more mainstream fodder. Do you miss that kind of edgy material?
I suppose I do, yeah. I mean, a lot of independent films or a lot of the people who created the independent films seem to have sort of migrated to television now, I think, because it's so hard to get independent film financed. It's even harder now, given what's happened in the last year, I think. So a lot of that great writing has probably moved over to television. I think when I was making those films 20 years ago, it was probably easier to raise a couple of $1 million than it is now. And people would go to the cinema to see those films. A lot of those films, again, end up on streaming platforms now rather than in the cinema, unfortunately. I don't know. I still try and chase down the good writing. But you're older now, and you've done it a bit more. So you try not to repeat yourself, I suppose. Well, that's what I aim to do, to not do.
Yeah. And you also worked with Neil Jordan, right, on Breakfast on Pluto?
Yeah.
I loved that film.
Yeah.
That was
thanks.
really wonderful. And your ability to make me believe that you were in this small, narrow-minded village, but ended up being beloved by the village because of your open nature it's a very hard thing to make work. And it was really wonderful.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. That's very kind. I have great.
Was it fun?
It was, and I have a real deep affection for that character and that film. There's a book originally by Pat McCabe, and Neil had made one of his books into a film before Breakfast on Pluto, called The Butcher Boy, which is one of my top 5 films, I think. And I had seen that. And I had read Breakfast on Pluto, and I'd heard a rumor that Neil was going to make it. So I just pestered him. I just pestered him to give me an audition for it, and eventually he did give me an audition for it, and we got the part. I got the part, and we made the movie.
And how did you prepare for that? Because that's working outside of yourself.
Yeah, it was. That was a kind of a long road as well. And the book was the main resource for that, and the script, and working with Neil. We did an awful lot of camera tests for the look, to get the look right. Costume and makeup and lighting and everything to get that right. And then you just got to dive in. I generally find that is you prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare, and then just dive in, and you generally. A lot of the
then
preparation.
Just be.
Yeah, is subconscious. Then is just, it's not really at the front of your mind. You're just trying to be in the present moment, really.
So you basically try and do all the preparation and work, and then when you get on set, you just are. You don't need to keep going back to that, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's the way I like to work anyway, because when you're acting, there shouldn't really be any past or future. There should just be the present moment and full awareness, of what's happening in that present moment. So I tend not to intellectualize anything at that stage. It has to be purely instinct. For me, that's how it works. I can't talk about it. I can just sort of try and demonstrate it, really.
How easy is it to play a character that's not Irish? I mean, you're speaking now, you've obviously an Irish accent, but I mean, we've watched some of your films lately and there's no accent there. Yeah. How easy is it to turn on that kind of performance?
I think when I was younger as well, I was very keen to, I did those first few Irish films. I was very keen then to show people that I wasn't just limited by my extraction, that I could play American or I could play English. And so then you got to go away and learn the accent. But learning an accent is like going to the gym for your mouth. I've said that before. You just got to put in the time, and really, really, really work at it. And it takes weeks and weeks. And ideally, you need to be in the environment. So if you're shooting a movie in America, you're in the environment all the time. You're hearing people speak like that all the time, and it helps an awful lot. So yeah, that was a sort of a goal I had, was to show that I could do that, or that, so that you could be cast in an American movie or an English film and people wouldn't question it. That was the ambition.
You did it well.
Yeah.
And when you're working, do you find the crew around you a distraction, or are you okay with it? Are you aware of the camera? Because there are some actors that just want you to be out of sight and the camera out of sight too. They'd rather it would be in another room, but it can't.
Yeah.
Or are you, because for instance, when we did 1917, it was such a dance with the camera.
Yeah.
So the guys had to know and had to be aware of where the camera was, and yet they were able to function. But there are other actors, I think, that takes away from what they're doing. How do you feel about working with
Well,
the technical end?
I was always so in love with the crew from that first film, Sunburn, that you mentioned, Roger, because it was like this huge adventure that we were all going, and it was a small little independent film, so we all became really such a tight unit, and I was so fascinated by the camera department and how much information those guys had in their head at all times, and I'm not just saying it because I'm on this podcast, but I've always got on really well with camera department and directors of photography, because actually we were playing this game on set the other day, like, if you were stranded on a desert island, which department would you be stranded with? and I said camera. And I've made good friends with DPs over the years. And I think that it's, particularly with if the DP is operating or with the camera operator, you form this very kind of intimate relationship. It's natural and they're watching all of your performance, and I think it would be odd if you didn't. Certainly, that's the way I work. I tend to kind of get quite close with the camera department because they're the people that are closest to you all day long. And I was fascinated by it. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what the hell is like f-stops and what the hell is like lighting and focus, and it was just this whole different language I couldn't figure out. And you know that thing when shooting on film, when you take it like take a mag, and there would be this camera assistant with his hands in a silver thing doing some magic there with his eyes closed. I didn't know what that meant or what was it. Still don't know what happens in that bag.
Well, a lot of people don't know what that is now, do they? With digital,
yeah. So I found it all so terribly romantic and fascinating.
Well, it's interesting. Do you think there was more romance when people were shooting film, emulsion, rather than digital?
Well, I don't know. Actually, you probably answered that question better than I would. Because when I first met you guys on that film In Time, which was 10 years ago.
Wow.
I seem to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, because that was the first time you shot digital, right?
It was, yes.
And I remember speaking to you, and you said, "No, this is the way forward. I'm on this train," and I found that fascinating. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what you thought about it. But recently, in the last few years, I've strangely shot quite a lot on film, and it's nice when you go back. And I've always liked that the sort of ritual of changing the mag and checking the gate and all of that.
Yeah,
it gives a nice little pause for the actor. Yeah. But I don't know. What do you guys think? I'd be curious.
I miss that. But it's so much the way different directors work, isn't it? You know, I mean, we've been lucky, really. You wouldn't know we were shooting digital because we have the same routine as if we were shooting film, really.
The same disciplines.
Yeah, same disciplines. Yeah. And I think that's the point of it, the discipline that everybody's focused on this one moment. You're building up for a take, and that's something very precious. Yeah. And I understand from some people they feel that's lost because you can keep the camera running and just do it again, and we'll have a bit of this, bit of that. It becomes a little more freeform.
But we've never worked that way.
I'm not really interested in that. I really like that building up for that moment, where everybody is concentrating on that one take at that one particular moment. Do you miss? I mean, it must have changed for you as it has for us that directors have less and less contact during a take. I mean, when I started, obviously, director was standing by me at the camera I was operating, and they were standing there looking at the actor. And now they're much more removed from the set. It's become more of a sort of technical exercise in a way, don't you think?
Yeah, and I mean, like Christopher Nolan, who I've had the pleasure of working with several times, he is always next to the camera. And if he's not next to the camera, he is on his tiny, tiny little monitor that takes like AAA batteries in it. It's not even a digital monitor. And it feels really, I don't know, it just feels like, how should I describe it? It feels like it's a kind of an act of solidarity. You know what I mean? You're there with the actor in the scene with him. And, everybody hates sort of video village and all that crack, but luckily that I don't really have that on most of the stuff that I do, so it's not an issue. But there is something lovely about the director being close to you and being in it. And I've had directors that have actually shot the movie themselves, and that's a really special feeling because they're running with you and able to sort of like direct you from just behind the camera. And I really, really loved that. But I know that it's not always possible, and I know that some directors like to look at exactly the image that you and I will be watching on the screen live, and I get that too. And now they even do this. I don't know if you guys do, but this sort of live grading where they bring you back like how the image will look, graded and everything. So it's all very, very immediate. I do like to have that sense of close collaboration with the director. So yeah, ideally I would prefer for them to be there in the room next to the camera with you. I mean, I remember working with Ken Loach. Ken would be stood next to the camera, but then he would actually turn away and not look at you as you performed and just listen.
Yeah.
And I asked him, why do you do that, Ken? And he said, because I could hear the truth in what you're saying without looking.
Wow.
Which I found was
absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
That you're talking about working on The Wind That Shakes the Barley, right?
Yeah.
How was that shoot? I mean, I'm interested in asking you about working on something that is so directly historical, and also directly about your country, your history.
Yeah, and set in the county that I'm from.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I don't think I realized that all at the time when I was doing the film, but Ken is one of the great world directors, and it was total privilege to work with him. I think it was also the fact that he was an Englishman making a story about Irish independence, and with his very strong political perspective that he has, that is clear in all of his films. That sort of made it easier. I think if an Irishman or woman had directed that, it would have been more controversial in Ireland. It was still controversial in Britain, but I think it would have been more controversial in Ireland because it ultimately the War of Independence ultimately led to a civil war, and so there's that's still felt in the country.
It was interesting that Neil Jordan did his film Michael Collins.
Yeah.
Right. And that actually was quite controversial as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in a different way. But the thing about the Ken's film, the other thing the reason I didn't really have a point of view on it was that I didn't have a script. We never read the script.
Oh, that's right.
So up until the sort of split came between the two brothers, I didn't know what side of the divide I was going to be on.
Wow.
Till it happened, in camera, effectively.
Right. Wow.
So it was only as the story progressed and I began to realize that, okay, this is the road that my character is going down. Then I began to realize what lay ahead for him and the sort of point of view that the film was going to take on it all.
Does that mean you shot it in order?
Yes, that was one of the exceptions to the rule. We shot that. He shoots all of his films in order. And so if that means going back to a location 3 or 4 times, they just do it. It was amazing. And sometimes we wouldn't know what was happening. Like there's a scene in that movie where we come over the brow of a hill and my kind of love interest in the film is there. And it's her house and I see her being taken out of the house by black and tans. And this is the first time I knew this was going to happen. And then they set the house on fire. And I didn't know this was going to happen. So every reaction you get is filmed totally naturally. There's no preparation or anything. It's just the actor reacting to what they see in front of them. So it had a profound effect on me making that film in terms of how I approach work. And I guess it relates to what I said to you earlier, where you can prepare and have all the, your dog-eared script with you everywhere. But unless you really get down and open yourself to your instinct and to what the other performer is giving you, then it's no use. You just have to be available and open emotionally, and that because that's all you can be on a Ken Loach film is open and available and sort of aware.
And how long was that shoot? How many months was the shoot?
Oh, I think it was quick, maybe like 12 weeks or something like that.
Oh, really?
Or
Oh,
less.
wow.
Yeah. That was a great experience.
Did you do a lot of research for a film like that?
Yeah, did a huge amount. Again, that's like 15 years ago. I measure these projects by how old my children are.
Yeah.
So, because my first boy hadn't been born then, so it's 15 years ago. So, actors are sort of we're experts in things for a brief period of time, and then we forget everything.
I think we all are in the business.
I think so. Yeah. So I was expert in all of that history for that summer, because it wasn't really taught in school, that particular time in history, because it was still so raw. And so yes, I did do a lot of research for that. But again, Ken's whole thing is like, forget all of that now. Now we're on set, just react as a human being.
Wow.
And how about the film Anthropoid?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about films that are based on historical realities. Anthropoid was based on an event just prior to World War II, wasn't it? How did that film come about? How did you research that, or did you research
also the one where the director shot it?
Yes,
right?
Sean Ellis. Yeah, a brilliant filmmaker. Yeah, he wrote that, shot it, directed it. Was one of the producers on it. He's a real talent. Well, we shot that in Prague, and we went to the actual church where the kind of sort of siege bit happens at the end. And spent time in there. You can still go there. You can see the bullet holes and everything.
Wow.
But then we couldn't shoot there, obviously. So they built the church, like a to scale replica of the church in Prague, and then we just destroyed it. But again, just reading. That it's been made into a film a couple of times. I didn't watch the prior versions of it because I didn't want to, have anything in my head about how other actors had interpreted that part. So just did a huge amount of reading and spent a lot of time talking to the director, and then trying to get the accent. It was just tricky.
Yeah.
Czech accent. That was a challenge, but I think we got away with it.
How did you work with that? I mean, it feels the way it's shot, it feels very kind of instinctive from all of you, everybody involved, including Sean with the way he's shooting it.
Yeah.
Was it storyboard? Do you often work on films that are storyboard, and was that, or was it? Did you and the director find shots, work together to find the shots?
I think, if I remember correctly, Anthropoid was pretty heavily storyboarded. Sean would have storyboarded, because I remember him sending me a picture of like a Action Man figurine of myself that he was building all these like 3D models of me and Jamie Dornan. And I think there's quite big set pieces in that film, so he had storyboarded a lot of them, and it really paid off, I think, in the execution. But then a huge amount of it was handheld, and he was operating the camera, so he was really responsive to how we were performing, was just really, really, yes, like you say, instinctively reacting to the scene. So it was a combination, I think, of like being in the moment with the handheld, and then being very have everything storyboarded for the big set pieces.
It worked really well, because, as you say, there were some big set pieces, especially in the cathedral when the Nazis are. I mean, in reality, I think those men held out for 6 hours against the German forces.
Yeah, it was extraordinary.
Pretty brutal.
Yeah. Do you like knowing ahead of time what the framing's going to be, or what the shots are going to be?
Sometimes, not always. I never look at the monitor.
Yeah.
I will only look at the monitor for like a stunt sequence, so I can see what I need to do technically. But I can never look back at a performance. I don't learn anything from it. It just will, like, destroy whatever tiny bit of self-confidence I have immediately, so I avoid it. at all costs. But no, I will like to know, like if there's more than one camera, you'd like to know where the other camera is, what it's getting. I don't like going into a situation where you don't know where the cameras are, or
Yeah.
Or I don't like going into a situation where everything is blocked out already and you just hit your mark.
Yeah.
That freaks me out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That I find that very, I don't know. I can't work like that. The blocking has to be in the room.
It's also taking away from a crucial step in the movie, because the movie evolves as it goes along, and it evolves during prep. And then you get on the set and the actors come in and they do it, and suddenly you see it in a different way. So you have to allow that to happen, I think. And I think that's why some people are afraid of storyboarding, because they're afraid that you get locked into it. But the people we've worked with just do it as a method of prep.
Yeah.
And then they get there on the day and they say, this is what we thought was important in the scene, but now it's happening this way. Let's change it.
Yeah, you're responding to the situation and to the environment and to the location and to the scene. So the Coens storyboard pretty heavily, don't they? From what I've heard.
Yeah. What's really interesting with Joel and Ethan, though, is, they'll storyboard everything, even if it's a two-handed conversation of people sitting at a desk. But they'll always block the scene with the actors in the morning of the shoot, and they will never show the actors as storyboards.
Yeah.
And sometimes the actors will start off doing something totally different than what the Coens have boarded. But by the end of the blocking rehearsal, you can, nearest damn it, the actors will be doing exactly what was storyboarded, but they won't know that was what was storyboarded.
They don't know they were pushed that way.
And Joel and Ethan won't suggest, not very often, deliberately, or you sit here or anything like that. It just happens that way. Wow. It's very interesting.
Well, they know actors well. I mean, they can...
Yeah, I think that's it.
Or else we're just really, really predictable.
So it works out great because everybody thinks it was their idea.
And that is the key.
Yeah.
But I imagine that working with different directors must be completely different experiences, because certainly us working with different directors, they react differently to actors, they react differently to crew. What do you like to have in a director?
Well, every experience is entirely different, but I think the thing that I always wish for and hope for is just a strong vision. That is really what I desperately need. Tell me what your vision is and help me fulfill that or let me help you fulfill that vision. That's really what I want. And then obviously a close collaborator. The whole endeavor of filmmaking or making television is a collaboration, is a massive collaboration, but particularly between the actors and the director. So you want someone with a really strong vision that's open to ideas and willing to, like best idea wins is always the approach that I've seen work the best. But then the director can say it was his or hers.
Have you ever read a script and think, oh, this could be really interesting, and then talked with a director and realized the director sees it in a completely different way than you and actually wants to do it in that way, and it's not what you think it actually should be? Would that make you leave the project, or would you just try and work into his viewpoint or her viewpoint?
It's never happened to me so far, but I think that I could see where that might arise. I've been lucky that the projects that I've jumped on board with, I fully believe and fully get behind the director's vision and want to help achieve that vision. So it hasn't happened to me, but I can see why that might fall into the creative differences category. But it hasn't happened to me so far, so I feel like blessed.
We were on a movie one time, quite a serious movie, and we were in the bar with two of the main actors, and one of them said, do you understand this? I don't really understand this. He doesn't seem to be working the comedy. I mean, for a comedy, why is he doing it this way? And what do you say? Because nobody thought it was a comedy.
Nobody else thought it was a comedy. No, it wasn't a comedy.
And it explained a lot about his performance.
Yeah. Wow.
Because he was on a different movie.
And that happens, and you can see it. Yeah, you can see
Yeah.
it. But that again, I think, comes down to communication from the director, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To say, look,
Yeah.
this is the sort of film that we're making, so that everybody is aware. I like it when directors share their, like, well, you get, storyboards occasionally, but more like, watch this film or watch that film, and that'll give you a sense of what we're trying to achieve. I love that, because you're educating yourself, but you're also getting a sense of what the ultimate goal is,
Yeah. Yeah. And how much do you interact with the other actors? I mean, about character. I'm sure you go to dinner with them and all that, but about character, do you ever sit down and say, well, wouldn't your character do you exchange notes at all?
Well, every actor has got a sort of different process, and you have to respect that process. Some actors really like to talk it out and really, really like to talk about everything and know everything, and then other actors just like to do it. And so you have to be responsive to whoever's in the scene with you, and I try and be like that and just go with whatever that process is that the other actors is going through. And it generally works out,
Isn't it a little bit easier if you don't know what they're thinking, like you wouldn't in real life know when you're talking to someone, you wouldn't know everything that's going through their head?
It's interesting because in film, that is generally the case. You arrive up and it's Tuesday morning, and all of a sudden somebody is playing your wife, and you've never met her before, and you have to pretend like you've been living together for 25 years. Whereas if you were to do that on stage, you would have spent 5 weeks talking it out, working out the backstory, figuring it all out, running the scenes and talking about it. And I enjoy both. I don't like rehearsing on film or for television. Generally, I don't, because my idea would be like, we should be filming this now, because we could be getting something. Other actors love rehearsing on film. And I understand that too, but for me, the two different mediums. For me, a rehearsal on film is not helpful. But again, for other actors, it's hugely helpful. So I respect that as well.
I once worked on a film with 2 actors. One was somebody that always did 1 or 2 takes, and then she figured that was it. She had nothing else to give. And the other would not really start finding the character till about take 15 or 20, which was kind of interesting because, each had to accommodate the other.
Yeah.
But it meant you could rarely do a 2-shot.
Yeah. It did kind of dictate the way you shot it.
But I bet you it worked out, and that the scenes were great, because that's kind of like every day, as better than me, is every day presents this huge new sets of problems that you have to resolve. And it might be, the sun won't come out, or the sun won't go in, or it might be the actor's late, or the actor needs 15 takes, or one actor needs 2 takes, or and so the more I do it, I think, like, for a director, a lot of the time it is just a series of problem solving.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have to find time to get your vision in and get your stamp on the whole thing. But these tiny little problems that accumulate over the course of a day, and then you go, by the time you've addressed all those problems, the day is over.
That's right. That's really true.
Would you ever want to direct?
No, I've done tiny little things, but I feel so privileged to have worked with such incredible directors that I don't think there's anything I could bring, really. I'm quite happy to continue trying to improve as an actor, and I don't need to prove anything as a director. I don't think I have the personality for it either. To carry that weight of responsibility. I love sleeping, and I don't think I'd sleep if I was a director.
Yeah.
It's that, and it's very political. You have to know how to get people to do what you want.
It's a very, very distinct personality, I think, that makes it a good director.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine when you were starting out on those smaller, very anarchic, instinctive kind of films that you did that you would ever be working on big Hollywood blockbusters like Batman?
No, is the honest answer. No. And I remember being in a state of shock on that film, really, the first one, for quite a while. No, it was sort of, it was quite shocking. But again, what made it okay was I had been a fan of Chris Nolan since watching Following and then Memento and then Insomnia. So when I got to meet him, it wasn't really about a Batman movie. It was about the idea of working with Christopher Nolan. And like I said earlier on, he creates an atmosphere on set where it doesn't feel like a ginormous, huge Hollywood film. It feels quite contained. There's always one camera, except in a huge, massive set piece, but there's generally just one camera and Chris and the DP and a boom. So it didn't feel, despite the fact that was Christian Bale was there in the bat suit. Despite that, it felt more. It had more in common with the films that I've been doing than I expected. Because of the nature of the way Chris works. So it wasn't alarming. Yeah. Like I was shocked by the scale of it, but in the actual work, generally my stuff was just me talking to another actor.
Yeah. So it's still personal. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris is all about performance. Yeah. So that part of it was really reassuring. And they're such lovely, welcoming, warm people that I quickly kind of figured it out.
I think that's the trick, isn't it? To try and keep all the technical kind of background of filmmaking in the background. Once you get into the sort of huge multiple camera and it becomes a big event and somehow overwhelming. I know I just as a cameraman feel that anyway.
It's also really frustrating, too, where you have a great take and the C camera. Well, it wasn't very good for the C camera, so we're going to redo the whole thing. It becomes
all about a process and not about the moment.
And also that camera was never going to be necessary anyway. It was put in at the last minute, and then you're redoing. And
it's funny because I'd agree with you both on that, and I've always loved it, just one camera. You move the camera around, get the coverage. But then didn't Altman shoot multi-cameras all the time? And then you get these extraordinary performances in his films, and
true,
you think, wow, well that's a different way of doing it, and it works. I mean, I would find that quite terrifying. Apparently, you never knew where the camera was going to be, and didn't know what.
You should try one of those.
You've done everything else.
I don't know if I could.
It's very interesting. You worked with Chris Nolan, and then you did. Then you did a film called Peacock, which we watched the other night, which is so interesting and must have been such a challenge, and it can't have been a large budget. So suddenly you're going from one world of filmmaking to another one. Can you tell us about that project?
Sure, yeah. It was written by Michael Lander. He wrote and directed it. And what age were my children? Let me judge how long ago that was. It was probably about 12 years ago or something like that. Beautiful script, very, very interesting, and a huge. I mean, any actor to play two characters. It's a character that has kind of dissociative identity disorder. Mm-hmm. So he plays himself and his sort of imaginary wife. It's, I guess, a kind of a spin on Psycho in a way. I mean, it's exploring similar themes. That was really great because he was in LA, Michael, and I was in London at the time. And I just was in my attic for about 4 months working on the characters separately, trying to create them. Oh, wow. And just being on FaceTime with him, like I am with you guys now. And just, I would demonstrate a character to him and then come back and do another character, and we worked it out like that for 4 months, and then I came to LA and where did we shoot it? Oh, we shot it in Iowa or somewhere. But that was one of those films that for whatever reason, huge amount of work, great crew, great people, and then it just never found a home. It never found a distributor. It never got picked up. Never even went to film festivals. So it's just one of those. Wow. There's a lot of films like that. I realize that happens a lot more than you imagine. So
Yeah.
it was just one of those ones, which was a shame. Maybe now, if it was being made now, there would be a home for it because of the way stuff is distributed and streamed now.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
you'd find a home quicker. But back then, there wasn't. It was too unusual a film, too kind of out there. So it never really found a home, unfortunately.
How did you work those two characters in the same film? Did you shoot
them back to back, or did you
back to
shoot
back? Yeah.
just you as John and then you as Emma on a different day?
Oh God, I would like to think that we did John and Days and Emma Days separately, but I know for a fact that we didn't because of
Wow.
like the budget was so small and the
Right.
and the schedule was so tight. I'm pretty sure we did. I think that the plan was to do as much as we could of John one day and Emma the other day, but I seem to remember there were days where we didn't. But yeah, it was a real challenge, and I'm proud of the work. It's just that's the frustrating thing. I can see why actors become producers, because once you're just the actor, which is fine, but you're just the actor, you hand over the raw materials to, the director and the editor and the producer and ultimately the distributor and the marketing people and all of that. But in a case like this, when it doesn't work, you feel a little bereaved because all this work has gone into something and you're quite proud of the work, and then it for some reason it doesn't happen. So that's why I understand why actors set up their own production companies and get into it, because they want to have a little bit more control over the work that they do.
Are you a producer on Peaky Blinders?
Yes, yeah. Well, executive producer.
For that reason?
I think that was possibly, but like we've been doing that now we're doing the 6th season now.
Yeah.
And I think that it was just helpful for everybody that I had some input into it, because I'm the one who's there every single day. I know the character pretty well, and hopefully I would be able to contribute something. I don't get involved at all in the script writing process, obviously, because Steve Knight is such a magician of a writer. Mm-hmm. And it's only I never get involved in the actual editing at all, but I will look at cuts and give notes on cuts. That's where. So it's a very collaborative, very kind of open relationship between all the producers and the director and the writer on it. But it's actually taken away some of the curse of me watching myself, because I have to watch it, but not just, watch it watch the whole story. It's been very useful. So you have to get over yourself and just watch the character and watch how the character relates to other characters and see the story arc in a sort of purely objective way, which is a good lesson for me, because I've always been horrified looking at my own work, like most actors are, I think.
Is doing a television series halfway in between doing a feature and doing theater, because you're doing the same character, so the same character? It's not like a new character every time.
It's intense, is what it's like. The schedule is like, if you think about it. So I think we have 18 weeks to shoot 6 hours of television. So if you break it down, it's 3 feature films. It's not hard to realize that the schedule is insane, and the page count per day is insane.
Wow. And
the budget then is never what you want it to be. And the ambition is large, because Steve writes with great ambition, and we have an amazing crew, so they're very ambitious. So we're always kind of reaching beyond what the budget will allow. So I'm in it now. We're halfway through right now, and it's not bad that we're living in the world that we're living in right now, because there is nothing to do, and I don't do anything when I'm shooting on this. Your life is just cancelled. You're just learning. The way you're like learning lines. Yeah. You go to bed, you have something to eat, then you get up and you do it again, and it's very immersive. But more so than a film, and more so than a theater performance, you live in the character's shoes more, because I started doing this when I'm when I was 35, Peaky, and when it finishes, I'll be 45. So, I have aged with the character, and I've kind of, we've all grown up. We've all become a decade older, all of us cast members. And so you begin to be able to bring other elements to the character as you mature with him, which you wouldn't do in a film because it's just a snapshot of you at that time in your life or the character.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting experience, long form telly, if you do it this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting, actually. I wonder if any actor will do a much longer run than you have, rather like Michael Apter's documentary series.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean? Yeah.
So an actor will start in a series, as a teenager or younger, and then work till they're...
Yeah.
Well,
that's a brilliant
There
series.
have been series where you've watched a kid grow up.
There's a TV series,
Howard.
Coronation Street in England.
Oh,
I don't know if
right,
it ran for, 40 or 50 years or something. Yeah.
A Boyhood did that, actually, didn't it? That wonderful movie?
Oh, yeah, Boyhood,
yes, to a
right,
degree.
you're
right.
Yeah.
Strange. But you still, how do you balance what you do then? How do you balance your life and your career?
I figured out that I kind of work to not work. Does that make any sense? Like when I work very intensely and get very heavily involved in it. And it's quite immersive. But then when I don't work at all for quite a long time, as long as I can keep it going, and then I go back into it really intensely. For example, before Peaky, and obviously compounded by the pandemic and everything, I was at home for 18 months. So you have a long period where I'm sure they just were dying to get rid of me. So now I'm here, and I can't go home again because of the situation. But I'm immersed in it, so it allows me to immerse in, and I quite like that. I couldn't work continuously. I couldn't go job to job. I don't have the capacity or the stamina creatively to do that. I need to rest after a job, and sort of fall back in love with it again, because I'm always exhausted after work, and I'm like, that's it. I'm out. Leave me alone. And being an actor is quite, again, as you guys know, it's like, if you're not careful, it's quite infantilizing, because you're like, you're told when to get into the car. You get into the car, you're met with a cup of tea. Your someone puts your costume in, someone takes your costume and you go and then you do the same thing. And everyone is unbelievably nice to you and very gracious. But I couldn't live like that all the time. It would drive me mad. I want to be able to, decide when I want to do things or what I want to wear, or decide if I want to have a mustache or not have a mustache. You know what I mean? Just so I need a break from it, because it is it's a strange world and it's not real, and I love it, but I need longer times off. As I get older, I need longer off from working than I did before.
I think also too, you're only thinking about yourself because everybody else is only thinking about you, handing everything off. And which makes you not as good at what you do. It's like, I never understand writers that don't go out and try and be in a situation they've never been in before, because you need that kind of stimulus to create a different character. You need to know that there are different people in the world. And I think a lot of people that work back to back in the film business just know about the film business, and it's reflected sometimes in their work.
Yeah, I think you have to sort of go back and kick back into real life, and just that's why having a family is so important, because they will always let you know about what real life is, and for me. So yeah, I agree with you. I also, if you're going to represent the average person, then you got to live as best you can as an average person. You know what I mean? And I know that actors have a very rarefied life in general, so I'm always very conscious of that, and just want to kind of live as decent a life off screen as I can.
I remember a very big time actor once telling me, I don't know what we were talking about, but he didn't know how to do laundry.
Yes.
He just didn't know how to do laundry, and I didn't know what to say. You ought to try it.
Yeah, it's very soothing.
Yeah, great results.
Yeah.
Very therapeutic, yeah.
Oh, I wanted to ask about the party because that was such a small set, and you guys must have been all on top of each other. And Alexei was on the camera, right?
Yeah.
Because we got to talk to him the other day, and so we've never met him in person, but he seems like such a sweet, lovely guy.
Oh, he's amazing. He did an amazing job in that film. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a fun film to work on? Because it seemed like it was a tough one.
For me, again, it was the chance of working with Sally Potter, who I adore, and such a fantastic filmmaker. And then we shot it in 12 days, I think. And
oh my gosh.
Amazing group of actors. And I think we did shoot that one consecutively as well, actually, because there'd be no reason not to shoot it. So yeah, we pretty much
I think
did.
you must have, yeah.
And it was really fast, really intense, and the character is a bit of a hoot for me. So I loved it. But and Sally made an amazing film out of it. I think tonally it's very interesting what she did with it, because it kind of is a comedy, but then it's kind of also quite dark, and then it also touches on kind of on politics, and she did an amazing job, and I love that. Again, that takes away some of the frustrations that you have as an actor, which are, waiting around, wondering what's happening, being called in, and then you sit around all day and you don't do anything. There was none of that on this. It was work, bang, bang, bang.
Not bad.
And that was part of the attraction, I think, for everyone that was on that movie.
Yeah.
Is that a deliberate choice? I mean, you say obviously it was Sally Potter, and why wouldn't you want to work with somebody like that? But do you make deliberate choices to do smaller films like that between doing that and Dunkirk? No,
genuinely, Roger, like there is zero plan. It's just
no plan.
No plan whatsoever. It's just that was a great script. I read it and I thought, wow, this is so clever. And Sally obviously is Sally, and I'm on. And we managed to. I remember you mentioned Dunkirk. I remember we finished that film on, I don't know, like a Thursday night, and I wrapped, flew to Holland, got a haircut, got like a World War II haircut, and then on Friday, Chris Nolan threw me in the sea for the first scene in Dunkirk where I pulled off the boat. So everyone was freaking out that I wasn't going to make it in time, but I did, and that was one example of going back to back that I actually enjoyed, because it'd only been a 12-week shoot or 12-day shoot,
12 days, yeah.
But it was such a different character, though. You had to flip into this other character, and you can do that in a day.
Well, I had been preparing it simultaneously, sort of doing the accent and reading about it and talking to Chris. It was fun. That was one of those ones where you go, "This is insane," but let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can pull it off.
I just imagine you being on Sally Potter's set of the party and suddenly coming out with the wrong accent and the wrong character. Whoops, oh, sorry, not that one today.
Yeah, my God.
Let's try that again.
I'm sure she would have let me know very politely.
I think so, yeah. What kind of role would you really love to do that you haven't done? Is there anything, or do these things just come along and you go, wow, yeah, I'd really like to do that, and they're not, as you say, not thought out and not something you're looking for?
Well, I imagine it's the same as you, which is you read a script and you go, wow, this is good. This is really good. Who's the director? You say, this is great. I'll do that. And there's no rhyme or reason. I remember Dunkirk and Anthropoid kind of came out in the same year or close to each other. And everyone said, so you just seem to play the PTSD soldier guy. That's your thing. It was a pure coincidence, just a quirk of distribution or whatever that they came out in the same year. So I imagine it is like the choices you make. It's just if the script is great and it's a good director and it's something different and it's a challenge, then great. And then there'll be times where you have to wait, like there's been times where you have to wait 8 months or a year for the right thing to turn up. I wasn't very patient when I was younger, but I think I'm getting patient.
No, I remember those days.
Yeah, for sure.
And your agent's saying, you should do this one. You should do this one. There's nothing else out there. I remember walking on the beach in Santa Monica once, and my agent was saying, no, you've got to do this film. You've got to do this film. And I go, no, there's something, I just don't want to do that film. And I turned it down. And the next day I got offered a film that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was absolutely perfect, and actually was one of the dream jobs I've ever done. So it's funny, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, well, that's
You've got
karma,
to follow
I
your
think.
instincts.
Yeah,
karma. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do believe, like, if you do hold out for things, if you really stick to your principles, I mean, you can't always do that. It's impossible in this industry. But if you try and be like pretty stubborn with your principles, I think it pays off. You know?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
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 And I don't think that you'll ever get typecast because you've done such a wide variety of things. It's great, I would think, for you, because I certainly believe you could play anything. I want to see you do a Western. That'll be interesting.
I would love to do a Western. Actually, that's not. I've never done a Western. They don't really make that many Westerns now, unfortunately.
They don't. It's sad,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been lucky to have done a couple, but they don't really. Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah.
Have you got any heroes, actors that are heroes that you looked up to in your career?
There's been a lot of Irish actors. I generally don't. I made the kind of sort of error of doing a list of people that I loved that were inspired me when I was younger, and it just kind of it changes all the time. I think, you know, and like when I was younger, would be a lot of the theatre actors that I worked with, who I'm still very close with in Ireland, that really, really inspired me and taught me so much. And then as you get older, there's other actors and directors, but I'm constantly being knocked out by actors and by new actors and new filmmakers that blow your mind and go, wow, you know, you better step up, because these guys are incredible. So yeah, it's constantly changing. And I just love watching films and love watching good television and just being impressed by other people's work.
It's been kind of fun for us because of the podcast. We go, and when we know we're going to talk to someone, we go and we search for films. So we're seeing a lot of films we didn't even know about, which was great. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, there's so much out there. Like you say, though, it's sad. Some of the films are very hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so sad that it's, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.